Hello, BookTube. There are some ways in which we are separate, you and I, on this channel. There's a gulf between us on some certain headings. Some of those are obvious. I have a snub nose and wavy black hair and A-frame shoulders and an 8-pack abs. I'm a sexy influencer, and not everybody is, and it's not really attainable. But there are other ways as well. It's not like I do about that. But there are other ways as well. There's one way in particular that I'm thinking of today that is a bit of a gulf between me and most of the people I would imagine who watch my videos, which is that I have been a professional book reviewer for a long time. And then there was a long time where I wasn't, and then before that there was a long time when I was. So I've been in the book world for long enough so that whether it's various venues that I've written for a lot of venues, or my own venues that I've had over the years, including now, where I have, for 10 years, I had the online literary journal, Open Letters Monthly. Now I have its successor, Open Letters Review. Whichever of those things it is, I am able usually to request a book from a publisher and get it. It's never been easier to do that. Especially in the age of social media. If you have a YouTube channel that's devoted to books and you have 1,000 subscribers, a publisher is probably going to send you the book that you request. And certainly the e-copy of that book, if you sign up, for instance, for NetGalley, takes almost nothing to qualify for some publishers on NetGalley. Some are a little more choosy, but you can end up with a stream of forthcoming books as ebooks coming to your e-reading device. But nevertheless, that can be a gulf. A lot of you, you're not in the book world except that you read books, which is fine. That is the only real way to do it. But you go to a new bookstore, a retail bookstore, and you are literally surrounded by things you might want that you can't afford, that just aren't in the budget. I remember that very well. I remember very well the rather long gap that I took between reviewing when I wasn't actively in the book world and was working in bookstores, in retail bookstores. So I was surrounded by things that I would have wanted and couldn't afford. But I like to close the gaps between us whenever I can. Like I said, there's nothing I can do about my molten sexuality or the fact that you're a little on the fugly side. There's nothing I can do about that. I love you anyway. I just don't want to be seen with you in public, that's all. But when it comes to new books, it occurred to me the other day that I have an opportunity to sidle right up next to you and pick your brain about how we would both go about doing something together in the real world. Every once in a while, as you've seen on this channel, despite the fact that I'm always out there, I'm always out there in the hustings trying to find out what's new, what's coming, what I can get my hands on, who's got review copies of what. I don't indiscriminately hoover it all up because I like it to be in the game. I like it to be involved somehow. So if there's a brand new release or something, I don't really care how hot it is. If I'm not interested in reading it, I'm not going to request it. I'm certainly not going to badger anybody about it. But even though I am out in the hustings, even though I am constantly emailing people, publicists and all, there are still gaps. I still miss things. I still miss books. Books that I'm aware they're out there, and maybe I get the e-copy, but I never actually get a finished copy of the book. And I want one. I don't want many finished copies these days. I am in the process of reshaping my print book library, to put it mildly. I am. But every once in a while I do. And it occurred to me the other day that I was reminded of something. It was the weirdest way to be reminded. I was reminded of it on Instagram. But I was reminded the other day of a relatively new book that I want, that I don't have. And when I say relatively, that's the key word, because it's a little too old for me to feel right about requesting it from the publisher. They would probably send it to me. But it feels a little bit transparent to request it from them now. This book has already had whatever critical appraisal it's going to get. That's the only legitimate reason why I would be asking for it, and the publicists know that. So I would have to buy this thing. But it is still new. I don't think there's a paperback edition out yet. It's still a hardcover. And I want to talk about how we go about doing that. That puts me exactly in the situation with 99% of you. The book is the new shotgun edition of the Diaries of Franz Kafka. It looks just like this 700-page brick of a thing. And I never got it from the publisher. I never got a print copy from the publisher. I believe I have an e-copy, but I want this. I want this to be my version of Kafka's Diaries. I have a paperback uh, edition from years ago that is now nowhere near as generous as this, and I'm interested in the new translation too. Kafka's Diaries are endlessly interesting. Oh my, they are endlessly interesting. I don't usually say that. Most people's diaries are not. I hate to say it, but most people's diaries beg for an extremely abridged one-volume edition. I was reminded of this just yesterday at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston because somebody unloaded a whole set in hardcover with dust jackets of the Diaries of Virginia Woolf. And all I could think about when I was looking at them was, oh, yeah, you want a one-volume abridgment. But Kafka was, of course, strange, the signature strange writer of the 20th century, and his diaries never let up, just never. So this would be a keeper. I already have it. I have a trade paperback, but this would be a keeper of a book to have on my shelf in paper and ink. And I don't have it. I didn't get it from the publisher in finished copy. You might want it too. So this video is me comparing notes with you about what you would do if you wanted this book and you weren't willing to wait 10 years for it to show up for $1 at the Brattle. Let's say you want this book and you want it right away. Now, some of the expedients that you will take if you're in this situation are not really available to me. One of the biggest expedients I would think that a lot of you would take would be to put this on your Amazon wish list, or let your friends and loved ones know that this is on your wish list and that this is the exact edition, this is the thing you want. I imagine that for a lot of you, that would take care of getting this in fairly short order, but I don't have any friends. I don't have any loved ones. They all done me wrong. The only loved ones that I have, that's actually not true to say that I don't have any loved ones. I do. I actually have more loved ones than anyone on Earth. I have roughly 10 billion loved ones, but none of them have opposable thumbs, so they can't use the internet, and none of them have wallets. They don't have any money. They're just a lousy little parasite species. So they're not any good for Amazon wishlist. They can't read. But when it comes to anybody else, if I were even to brute this around, the natural instinct that I have is to brood around not just to the general public, but to other critics. Hey, you go to the newspaper, to the newsroom in San Francisco, is there a copy of this just sitting there that no one wants? Maybe you got it. Maybe your newsroom got it. Maybe I'm sure that the Times newsroom got at least 2 copies of this, the Post, the Journal. But other newspapers as well. Maybe some newspaper got a copy of this and nobody wants it. It's a tough thing to commission. If you're a book section editor, you're going to look at it and say, well, even if I got a copy, my readers are not going to want a review of this thing. I know my readership, and this is not going to interest them. It's going to interest 10 of them, but not the rest. If you're a good book section editor, you will want to interest as many readers as possible. That would be my first reaction, my first response here. I've resisted that because I wanted to make this video. I want us to be closer. Since not all of you are agreeing to come over here for wine and calzones, and since the ones who do come over for wine and calzones show up on video the next day like they're in some sort of Geneva hostage situation, I can be a little rough on my guests. My little dog will scream at you. She will jump all over you, and then once she's comfortable enough so that she feels like you're not going anywhere, she'll start to savagely bite you. And that's nothing compared to what I'll do. I will fill you with wine and calzones over and over and over again until you start to wear down around the edges. Nevertheless, so I resisted the urge to do that, to reach out to other critics and say, hey, does anybody have a copy of this thing that you could put in the post to me? Almost all of those people, almost all the critics I would reach out to have got books in the post from me. It's a kind of an unspoken thing that you're going to say yes unless you want it yourself. A lot of critics I know will say they want this, put it on their shelf, and never get to it. Literally never read it. But some of them might. But I've resisted doing that because I want us to be on the same page. In other words, if you saw a listing for this, or even went to the Strand in New York City or your local Barnes & Noble and saw this on a new release table and said, oh, I want that. I don't even remember off the top of my head how much this is. I think it might be $30. thereabouts. I don't have a retail bookstore that I go to here in Boston. There are only two. There's one 5 minutes from me where I'm not welcome for racist and sexist reasons and political reasons. I am not welcome. I don't even need to ask. The only person in that bookstore who would welcome me is the beagle that they keep on the premises, who would say, "This is not only is this guy good, but he's the best guy in the world." They wouldn't care. The proprietors of the shop wouldn't care. If I were to go in and special order a copy of this thing, God knows the kind of sideline sort of passive-aggressive questions that I would get. Kafka's kin famously died in the Holocaust. If Kafka had not died an agonizing death where he couldn't feed himself, he had to starve to death. If he hadn't died that way, he would have been in the concentration camps himself. He would have been their highest profile victim. Probably if I went to that bookstore 5 minutes from here, they would just sort of idly ask, "So, would you have been okay with that?" So I'm not going to bother. I can tell from their window display that I wouldn't be welcome inside the shop. But there's another retail shop here in Boston. On the other side of Boston Common, there's Beacon Hill Books, which I've never been to. There's literally nothing else over there for me. There's Mass General. So I guess if I wanted just an idle afternoon to tootle on over there, have a blood panel workup, and maybe a proctology exam, then I could also work in the bookstore. I'm not going to do that. There's nothing else for me to do over there. I would just have to make a flying sortie and then come back. You'd think I'd do that just once, just to see what it was like. But I haven't done it yet. It certainly wouldn't be anything regular on my route. I guess there's also Trident Booksellers on Newbury Street, and Newbury Street is Trident Booksellers like 5 feet away from the Newbury Comics that is my comic shop when I get around to going there, but I don't get around to going there. The point being, let's say, for the sake of argument, that I don't have easy access to get this book in person. Whether it's hitting up friends of mine to send me a copy that came to their newsroom, came to the Chicago Tribune newsroom. The Trib is certainly not going to run a review of this book, so it's just sitting here. I'll be, eventually it'll just end up at the bottom of a pile somewhere, and that'll be that, unless you want it. I'm not going to do that, and let's just say that I don't have a big retail bookstore that's convenient for me to go to that isn't judging me. There's no Barnes & Noble here anymore. So let's just say that we're in the same boat there. Let's say you're the same way. A lot of you don't live within easy access of a big, real good retail bookstore. You have to get in the car and drive for an hour, one way, something like that. I've heard endless stories. What would you do if that were true? If you saw this thing and you really wanted it, what would you do? That's the question. That's the way that we are on the exact same page for this video. Traffic is backed up for miles. I thought I turned off the notifications on this thing. Apparently I did not. I'll have to go into that after this video, but this video has already been hard enough to make as it is, so I'm not going to stop. What would you do here? Let's say you have money in the book buying budget for a hardcover copy of Kafka's Diaries, regardless of what it costs, unless it's, exorbitant, but it won't be. Let's say it isn't exorbitant. Let's say that for this month, you have money in the book buying budget for 4 new releases. Now, 3 of them are already taken, of course, sight unseen, because you want the new Penguin Classics of Marvel Comics. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men. You want those, so those come first. Those are $20 a piece, or more. So we're getting up to $100. Let's say $100 is your book buying budget. You've got the rest of it for Kafka's Diaries. Where would you go to get a print and paper physical copy of this thing? Would most of you shop for it just on Amazon? And Amazon discounts it, I'm sure. Would you just take it on Amazon and get it sent to you? Amazon is evil, but they are big and they are efficient. You'll get the thing in a day. It'll be in perfect condition. There won't be any question of the seller lying to you. The seller is Amazon. So there's that. There's also, what is that virtue signaling thing that a lot of people on BookTube like? I always refer to it in my head as bookselling with pronouns. It's that aggregate bookseller site where your order will be virtuous, where it will shop with local bookstores around you and fill the order that way. I forget the name of it, My Bookshop or something like that, or I don't remember. I always think of it just as book shopping with pronouns. But there's that. Maybe you're a big fan of that, or would you go looking around for deals for this thing. This edition of Kafka's Diaries is relatively brand new. The general public who's not a book reviewer would certainly consider this to be brand new. Would copies of this be on eBay yet? Brand new? And would you trust them if they said so? Or the Amazon Marketplace? Or somewhere else? I'm curious to know what you would do if you wanted to get this book in the best condition for the lowest price. Not because you're cheap, but because you want to fit as many books as possible into the month's book buying budget. And 3 Marvel Comics anthologies are coming out. That's going to take a chunk out of the book buying budget. I hope I'm going to get those in the mail. I'm not going to go and buy those. I'm going to dun the publicist until she coughs them up, like she did the first 3. But this, I can't do that. I missed the window to really bother the people at Shocking about this thing. It's too late now. I could say that I'm going to write about it at length, and I will do that. But I don't know that they'd go for it. It might feel a little awkward. It might feel a little bit opportunistic on my part. And besides, this brings us closer together. This is a relationship building exercise. What if you had the money and you were going to spend it on this? What would you do? Feel free to tell me all about it. You can leave it in the comments. Of course, you can email me. I'm very happy these days that when I bring up a discussion, 100 of you email me. You don't even bother to leave a comment in the comments field, which is really helping YouTube rather than helping me. I go through my comments all the time. I answer them, as many as Warrant answers. But tons of you just email me, and you should. We're friends, right? So feel free to leave a comment so that other people can see your suggestions, or to email me about what you would do. What's my best option for getting this thing? Once upon a time, I didn't have that question because there was a great big Barnes & Noble just a few subway stops from where I am. And I worked at Barnes & Noble for a quarter of a century, so I have a permanent employee discount. That would have been fine by me. That would have been absolutely fine by me. I would have just gone in, special ordered it, made sure that it was okay when it came in, and bought it from Barnes & Noble for 40% off or something like that. But for the first time in a long, long time, Boston doesn't have a Barnes & Noble. So what would you do? Tell me about all your suggestions. If I want this thing by the end of the month, what am I going to do? What are we going to do to get a copy? So there you go. I'll leave it up to your judgment. You tell me what strategies you take, even if you don't think it's a strategy that would work for me. If, for instance, you're in Europe. I'd still like to hear it. I'd still like to hear what you do when there's a brand new book you don't want to wait on. Waiting, I think, is a strategy that we adopt, that 95% of us adopt 95% of the time when we're in this situation. I don't, because I will request it. But when I wasn't, I waited. It's just what you do. You wait for the paperback. That'll be more expensive than or less expensive than you wait for it to come out used or be at the library or a little free book sale or something like that. I still want to know what you do in a situation like this, even if you don't think it will apply to me. So let me know. I will wrap this up. What do you do, baby? You don't have any possessions. She doesn't have any possessions, so she doesn't do anything. What's the matter, baby? What's she doing? Anyway, that's my question for you today. If you wanted a new book, what would you do? So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.